Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm doing things a little different than usual. I am reviewing the first 4 episodes of a series, and that is Persona 4 the animation. First of all, I also have to offer you guys an apology. I know if you've been following me on Twitter and in my channel update videos that I've been promising to do these reviews for months now. I'm sorry, it just took me a long time to really just get off my butt and do it. But I'm started. I've started on it. Though sadly, I'm going to be moving and starting a new job next month. In addition to all my other normally scheduled reviews, so I don't know when the next bunch of reviews are going to go up, but I will eventually get the whole series reviewed. I am going to continue to kind of do these in batches of probably about 3 or 4 at a time, simply because I think this is a series where it just works better that way. Doing these as individual episodes, I wrote down my notes that I use for all my reviews in divided them into individual episodes, and honestly, on an individual basis, there's not really a whole lot to chew on. If you put them together, though, over the course of several episodes, then I think I have enough material to make a much better review. Now, before we get into this in too much depth, first thing I need to say is that if you have not seen the show and if you have definitely not played the video game, I'm going to be pretty unapologetic with the spoilers here. So if you don't want to know anything, if you don't want this big stuff, including the really big deal of what the show is, the big mystery of Persona 4, turn away now. Now, as I have said, Persona 4, I have played the game. I've beaten it twice. I absolutely love it. It is easily within my top 3 of favorite RPGs of all time. And you know what? I'll just give you the list anyway. Number 3 is Persona 3, 2 Persona 4, and number 1 is Final Fantasy X, actually. And that's mainly due just to the fact that that is the game that made me love RPGs. Now, with that said, let's just kind of get right into it. Now, it has to be said, if you have played the game, you are just going to be watching this anime series and just geeking out so much because it is just a phenomenal translation of the game into an animated form. The music is the same. The movement from days to days, even the characters' stat screens. I mean, it is as perfect a realization of taking the game from the video game genre and turning it into an animated form. I mean, really, I just cannot say enough great things about how well they did the translation. This, folks, this is what we as geeky folks should always hope for. This is us getting manna from heaven. This is the gold standard of how you could do these things. I mean, I don't think there are enough euphemisms I can give for just how well this is handled. Now, there are 1 or 2 little things that I am going to quibble a bit. For example, there was I noticed in the episodes the way they we listened to the Junes commercial. Now in the game they say something like "Come on over here and get in touch with our products," and in the anime they say it's phrased slightly different. Now I guess I should specify that I watched the English dub of the anime series simply because I played the game in English, of course. So to me, that's just how I view Persona 4. I've seen videos and listened to the Japanese version. Gotta say, Japanese Saki has a really annoying voice. But for the most part, Persona 4 is something that I perceive of as being in English. So that's why I chose with going down that route. Actually, before I continue on any further, since we're talking about the languages and things, if you're a regular with my reviews, you've probably heard me mention that I used to live in Japan. I lived there for about 3 years. And 2 of those years I actually spent in a rural Japanese town in Kumamoto Prefecture, town of about 15,000 people in Kyushu. So Persona 4 being set in a small Japanese town, this is a place that I've lived in a small Japanese town, so I understand how people feel living there. Like Junes, there was not exactly. There was something similar, not too far away from where I lived. It was actually sort of a mini mall, but it was somewhat similar. People keep calling that Junes a Japanese Walmart. Well, yeah, not really. I don't really see too many WalMarts that have huge, you know, yeah, whatever. Okay, I'm kind of getting a little off topic here, but basically the thing is that one of the reasons I connected so strongly with Persona 4 is that I did spend this time living in the small Japanese town, and I swear to God, when I have the character who we're going to refer to as you because that's the name he's given in the anime. When I have him running around the town, there were moments where it's like, oh man, there was a place exactly like that in the town that I used to live in. So, and just things like walking past the river on during the summer days, it just really took me back to that time in my life so much, which is, like I said, one of the reasons why I connect with this game so much. But anyway, let's just kind of get right into it. I'm not going to talk too awful much about the plot this time around, just because, well, if you've played the game, you know what's going on here. Now, there were a few things that they did change, like I said, that I didn't like, but let's talk about some of the things that I did like, and then we'll dive into the characters a little bit more. The first thing that I did like is we get to see things like Saki finding Mayumi Yamano's body, and we get to see a much more detailed look at what happens when Saki's body is found. And just the looks on the body's faces, the way their eyes are kind of rolled up, it just really adds to the fear, to the horror of what's going on. Stop and think about what it must be like if you're living in a small town and suddenly dead bodies are turning up like this, people going missing. That's got to be some really terrifying stuff. Now, let me see here. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes for a moment. Now, another thing that this show also does is that they're able to get into some things that were only hinted at or mentioned very briefly in the game. Things like the story of Chie getting the dog that Yukiko found, or we only kind of get this very vague hint that Yukiko owned a bird at one point. Now, again, this is something that's only just a glimpse in the game, but it actually becomes extremely important in episode 4 of the series. And while this is, of course, something of a necessity, now, as great as the game is, a large chunk of the time you spend playing it is, of course, devoted to just running around through the various dungeons defeating monsters. And while we certainly do get to see the characters, using their personas to kick some monster butt, obviously we don't want to see them doing that for like 3 hours at a time to level up enough so they could take on the next boss. That would make for an extremely boring show. Sweet cafe au lait. So, of course, we need something to fill that time. And naturally and wisely, of course, they chose to give us some backstory, to expand on things that they just really couldn't do in the game, or maybe things that they had planned to do at one point and that they got cut. So in that sense, they are really able to keep that strong storytelling that Persona 4 is famous for, and just sort of do it in a slightly different way, because of course we don't have time. We only have about half an hour for each of these episodes. We can't have these long, in-depth conversations that go on for a good while like you can have when you're playing the game. Things have to be, a little bit more chop. But the show, at least within these 4 episodes, does handle that pretty well. Now, let's start in and talk a little bit about the characters. Now, of course, the big thing here is we have the main character getting an official name. It's not Soji Seta, as it was with the manga. We get instead Yu Narukami. And we kind of start to, of course, it's just simply a necessity that he has kind of a personality here. And I have to say they really did go with a good choice of how it is. Yuza seems to be a decent guy, a little on the quiet side, probably just from having moved around, but he has a really nice sense of humor and seems to be a very pretty good-natured guy all around. So of course, if you played the game, everybody had their own little way of playing him. How and of course, in regards to who he chose to date, if anyone at all. But here, I think they just they had to choose some kind of a personality for him. I guess what I'm saying here is, and I think they did it in such a way that it's very smart. And of course, the big thing that they do is that they have to sell that this guy, when he has that moment where he activates his persona, that we don't really question too deeply, hey, why is it that this guy was able to do that without a shadow? And the I suppose just kind of the confidence that Yu seems to have. He's a guy who seems very, very comfortable in his own skin. I think that helps really sell that stuff. But let's move on. I don't really have a whole lot to say about what's going on with Nanako and Dojima as they relate to you. Yeah, they're really such a small presence in these first episodes. And of course, they're going to become important later on, but not right here. Although, did anyone else think it was kind of strange that Dojima said that he had gone and picked you up at the airport when he in fact picked him up at the train station? Did you guys notice that? Okay. Anyway, moving on. So let's talk about Yosuke. Now, in the game, one of the roles that Yosuke has is basically to sort of be an unofficial guide / tutorial for people who suck at solving mysteries. If you really pay closely attention to what Yosuke says during the course of the investigation, it's obvious that he's actually a surprisingly smart guy and not a bad detective for somebody who's a 16-year-old kid that works a 16, 17-year-old kid that works at Japanese Walmart. So, of course, so I always kind of like to say that Yosuke is not a good leader, but he's a very good Commander Riker. He's very good as the number 2 guy, and I believe he even says that at one point in the game. But here you get to see that highlighted, I think, quite a bit better. There isn't so much time between the last time we saw Yosuke being reasonable and smart, and then the next time we see Yosuke doing the same thing in the course of the investigation as there is in the game. Here, it's much easier to connect to the idea that, Yosuke, despite his personality, there's a fairly decent brain underneath all of that. And of course, you can't really talk about Yosuke without making mention of his relationship with Chie. Now I've said to some of my other friends who are fans of this game that if Persona 4 had been a slightly more traditional RPG where there was a hero and then there was some sort of designated love interest for him, like in so many games, then that Chie and Yosuke would have been paired up as side characters. I mean, there's just so much stuff in the game that seems to hint this way. The rather infamous positioning the two take when they go and spy on Kanji, and then there's just the simple fact that when you're fighting Shadow Chie, her shadow will sometimes simply pause and just sort of look at Yosuke and not actually attack you. I mean, did you guys notice that? Kind of wonder what else Chie's shadow might have said if Yosuke had been there before she'd really manifested fully, huh? Kind of makes you wonder. But anyway, let me see. Just looking at my notes here. Sorry, I kind of have these spread out over 2 different pieces of paper rather than the usual one, which is why I'm a little bit disorganized. Okay, let's bring it back. So since we're talking about Chie, I do like that. Now, of course, one of the big changes was that they got a new person to do the voice of Chie. She's of course also taken on the role of Chie in Persona 4 Arena. A lot of folks complained about the original actress, and I think there were some very valid criticisms in that regard. But honestly, I never thought it was quite as bad as so many people seem to make it out. I mean, you know how people are on the internet. Everybody has to be such a drama queen about everything. And honestly, I thought that by the end of the game, she'd leveled out pretty well. But it's a pretty easy adjustment to make. And as I said, here we get to see visually a lot of things that Chie only kind of verbalized, like the flashbacks in episodes 3 and 4, where we kind of really get an idea of what's going on in her head. We get to see that jealousy, that need to control Yukiko within Chie. It's really the case of show don't tell, and this really, really enhances the story for her very well. And of course, as I've mentioned, there's also the flashback when she and Yukiko were kids. So really, while Chie is of good character in the game, albeit one who seems extremely suspiciously like Lisa Silverman for Persona 2, she here, I think, in the animated series, gets a little bit more depth. And I think it's really easier to kind of understand Chie if you see her face, the looks on her in her eyes when she's seeing these things. It's like the guys fawning over Yukiko and all this other stuff. It really drives home what's going on in her head. And of course, the exact same thing is true in Yukiko. We get to see her perspective on her relationship with Chie, what she was thinking. And it is really just a very interesting and very strong dynamic. Two people who are, of course, at the same time extremely good friends, but who also have these very deep-seated levels of honestly jealousy of each other. That is really kind of a poison in their relationship, and it takes this bizarre supernatural event to really bring it all out in the open. But ultimately, once it's done, that they are the stronger friends for it. But anyway, getting back to Yukiko, as I've said, we get the whole story that was only very vaguely hinted at with her owning the pet bird. And it is really a very great shame that this was cut from the game, because when we understand the story of the bird, the form that Yukiko's shadow takes makes infinitely much more sense. Again, this is one of those places where the anime just really blows the game out of the water in that regard. It is just simply told in a much better way here in the animation. Now, let's talk about, since we're talking about the shadows, let's talk about the one big thing in regard to the shadows, and that is, of course, that they say they have a slightly different key line. Now, in the game, of course, it is simply, I am a shadow, the true self. Here in the anime, it is, I am a shadow of your true inner self. And I know some people out there were kind of rather upset by this change. And on the one hand, I can't blame them. I am the shadow, the true self. It's short, it's punchy, it's scary, and for this game, it is the iconic line of this game. However, let's think about this from the perspective of somebody who has never played the game and is just coming into this watching the anime from episode 1. They don't have the benefit of all these conversations and time that we get in the game going into the details of shadows and shadows emerging and killing their other selves and all this other stuff. It has to be, again, like I said, it's just got to be a lot more chop chop, let's get to it. And if you say, I am a shadow of your true inner self, well, there, in one sentence, it explains reasonably clearly just what a shadow is, what these things are, why there is somebody who looks like this character except they have yellow eyes and this kind of creepy voice, and why they just turned into a monster. Again, it's for the sake of audience clarity. And while I do sympathize with that point of view. Again, I do love that line. It is really one of my all-time favorite lines from a video game. I just think that terms of what needs to be done to tell a clear and concise story to people who may not be familiar with the game, that this is a reasonable and necessary change. Let me see here. Of course, this series does add in some new elements. Things I liked, like I really got an enormous kick out of like after he sees Yukiko's uh, shadow doing the little TV show, going, I wished I'd taped that. I mean, that's exactly the kind of reaction a teenage boy would have. And of course, there's a scene where he gets bit, and in the game he could still say that whole like, I think I might cry. I believe it became I think I might die with a D in the anime. And one thing I did enjoy was in the game, if you kind of give that answer, Chie will fawn over you a little bit, and here in the anime, if you try that, it's basically no sell. So I kind of like that. Both are interesting, but I have to say I like the game a little bit more because it seemed it made perfect sense for a teenage guy to try and wring a little sympathy out of a cute girl. So let me see, what else do we have? Of course, I've mentioned that they kept a lot of the music from the game here in the show, and they use it brilliantly. I mean, how can you not just get this enormous charge when they fire up the music at the right moment, and it just becomes a thing of beauty. It really just parallels the sense of satisfaction I would get in the game when I took down a boss. And yeah, like I said, folks, the translation of this game from game to anime is just wonderful. So again, I also like, if you pay very close attention, you can kind of see elements of the gameplay aspect not added in there. Like episode 4, we kind of get a hint of Chie's vulnerability to fire in the fight with Yukiko's shadow. And no, I don't really mind the fact that they ditched the charming prince little minion that Yukiko had. Honestly, God, I hated that thing so much. It was just something that really would have needlessly complicated the story element at that point. So I can live with that. And oh yeah, speaking of lines changed, I think a few times it was changed. Became things like "That's not me" rather than "You're not me." Again, another very iconic line, but again, little tiny changes that ultimately don't really matter. So I think I'm gonna wrap this up here. I know I've said it repeatedly that this is an absolutely phenomenal translation of an already extremely great game, but I simply think that it needs to be said again because this is a transition from one medium to another that is done on a level that is so rare. It's hard not to want to acknowledge that you can't acknowledge that enough. And while there are some minor changes, some minor, I even hesitate to call them flaws. It's just when something is so well done, anything that seems like a slight deviance seems to be a larger issue than it really is. So at the end of the day, folks, if you liked the game Persona 4, you're going to love this anime. It is just stellar stuff. If you haven't played the game and you're just coming into this show from the dark, then this is still going to be some pretty enjoyable watching for you. So definitely give it a try if that's your situation. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.